Let's talk about that for a minute. HDR, high dynamic range, which Stephen, you were saying earlier, has been available in film ever since film, was created, and yet it couldn't really be accessed. So, can you just spend a moment and talk through what that is and how it's now more accessible in the digital realm?
HDR is coming at us like a freight train. We as technology develops, as engineers and manufacturers come up with newer ideas, for years there's been what we like to call the K-wars, and it's building better and bigger and more resolution, whether we need it or not. And I certainly understand from a marketing point of view that 4K is a marketing tool. Whether it's an imaging tool that's important or yet, now I'm not convinced. I'm more focused on, not to make a pun, I'm more interested in color depth, because I think that gives a much richer look to the image. So I'd rather shoot at what's considered a higher bit depth than a higher resolution. Too much resolution is what the kids call TMI. Too much information. So we have to be careful with that, because, how many actors and actresses want to see every pore on their face,
And Glenn, in that world of HDR, how does that affect ARRI?
Well, with our background in building film cameras, we started from the beginning in digital to try to replicate the characteristics of film. And we built film scanners and film recorders before we built cameras, so we kind of very much understood the film characteristics. One of those key characteristics is dynamic range, and like you said, film always captured an HDR range. We didn't call it that, but a wide latitude, a wide range. It could capture from inside to exteriors to blown out windows in the background. You didn't need to worry about it as much in terms of how you lit and filled the backgrounds, because you had that range to work with in post-production. So from the beginning, we designed a chip, as Steve says, the sensor that goes in the camera is what really defines the image and defines, if you will, the personality or the color characteristics of that. We designed a chip to match film, and in some ways go beyond it in terms of sensitivity and latitude, particularly at the low end. But so it's been there. It's really now the advent of HDR displays and streaming video as a means to get to the HDR displays. And Amazon and Netflix have jumped in distributing their HDR content. The thing that makes it work is that the new generation of TVs are smart TVs. Basically, they automatically set up and recognize that it's an HDR signal coming, so you can get the brighter picture, the higher contrast, and really, again, assuming it's steered properly from the creative direction in post-production, you can get a more dramatic result from the picture.
If you have a good guy that comes to your house and sets up your screen properly.
No. With today's generation of TV sets, they're very good, and they're automatically set up, with the HDR signal, they're automatically set up to get the right results.
Yeah.
But
okay.
There's a problem. The problem is that along with all these new technologies, there was something developed that we see in broadcast and in streaming called motion interpolation. And on your sets, it might be called smoothing, and it might be called some other marketing term. But what it does is it removes the ability for the audience to suspend disbelief. It's great for sports, great for reality, great for things like that. But in fact, if you notice your TV looking like a live video show when you're watching a movie, you have motion interpolation turned on in your sets. And almost all sets you can turn it off, but it's buried deep in the menus. And we know that from studies, only 2 to 4% of the population does anything to control their sets. So this spring, we made a presentation at the Hollywood Production Alliance retreat, which happens every year. It's kind of a fun week, where we feel that with smart TVs and with the amount of availability of bandwidth, that the material that's being shown, whether it's streaming or broadcast, could actually control the TV to set it up for the type of viewing that would be best for that material. And that's something that manufacturers are becoming interested. Netflix is very interested in that and doing some of it now. And LG and Samsung are very interested in that process. So
Yeah, and I want to focus a little bit more on that.
I'll come to your house
just
and
in
set up
a
your
minute.
new
Yeah,
TV.
somebody needs to. And Sherri, HDR for you, what's the impact in your world?
It's actually really exciting, especially for my talent, my colorists, because they're able to Stephen's point, you're able to work with the color and really capture so much more and push things, and it really helps then the storytelling. And what are those pivotal moments that you want to highlight on? What are the ones that you don't want to focus on? What are the so you're just able to get so much more dynamic range out of the imagery. And my talent at first were a little struck by it because it's different. And what we do know in post-production is that we're not getting longer post periods to finish a show. It's actually becoming shorter because, again, with technology and everything else, everything is just becoming condensed. So it's exciting, but it's still very complicated because there's so many sets of deliverables that need to be done. So there's still the SDR deliverable that needs to be created, and then there's right or wrong, and then there's the HDR deliverable that needs to be created, and so on and so on. So
And for a company like Netflix, multiplied by Apple, Hulu, Amazon, all of those companies, they have worldwide distribution platforms. So where we used to make prints for release in 4 weeks or whatever, Netflix, by example, right now needs 8 weeks to deliver. So, that all either has to expand the post schedule or it has to be jammed in, as Sherri says. So we'll come back to that in a minute.